The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and vanilla pastries, the kind of place Ethan rarely entered. His hands still carried traces of engine grease no matter how hard he scrubbed, and his old denim jacket looked out of place among the polished tables and soft jazz music. He wasn't used to dating, certainly not blind dates, but his best friend, Jake, had insisted. "She's classy but down to earth," Jake had said. "You need to stop fixing cars for 5 minutes and talk to a real woman." Ethan had laughed it off, but now, standing at the entrance with his heart thudding, he felt foolishly nervous. He scanned the cafe looking for a woman named Claire, who was supposed to be wearing a lavender dress. His eyes landed on a young woman sitting by the window, sunlight touching her chestnut hair, a lavender dress draping over her frame like silk water. That had to be her. She looked delicate yet strong somehow, the kind of woman who didn't need anyone but made you want to stay anyway. Ethan approached, trying to seem confident. "Hi," he said, smiling awkwardly. "I'm Ethan, you must be Claire." The woman blinked, a little surprised, then smiled faintly. "Actually, I'm Emily," she said, her voice soft, carrying a quiet depth. "But you can sit if you want." He froze, realizing his mistake too late. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I think—" But she shook her head gently. "It's fine. I could use the company." He hesitated, then sat, unsure why. Maybe it was her eyes, warm and sad all at once, or maybe it was the way she said company, like she hadn't had much of it lately. The table was small, intimate. He noticed the sleek wheelchair tucked beneath it, barely visible under the linen. His breath caught. She followed his gaze, her smile tightening for a moment before relaxing again. "Car accident," she said simply, as if reading his thoughts. 2 years ago." Ethan swallowed. "I'm sorry," he murmured, not knowing what else to say. "Don't be," she replied, stirring her coffee with care. "It's not contagious." The joke was dry, but it made him chuckle. She watched him with mild curiosity, her eyes flicking to the oil stains on his sleeves. "Mechanic?" she guessed. "Yeah," he admitted. "Cars, motorcycles, sometimes lawnmowers if people beg." Her lips curved slightly. "So you make broken things work again?" He smiled, scratching the back of his neck. "I try to." "That's good," she whispered, almost to herself. "Maybe you can fix people too." Something in her voice made his chest tighten. The noise of the cafe faded, and for a strange, suspended moment, it felt like they were alone in the world. She asked him about engines, and he asked her about painting because he'd noticed the faint streaks of watercolor on her fingers. "You paint?" he asked. She nodded. "Used to," she said. "Now it's harder to hold the brush. But I still try." "Then you're tougher than me," he said. Ethan didn't know how it happened, but what was supposed to be a quick apology turned into hours of talking. Emily had this calm, magnetic presence that made time fold in on itself. He wasn't used to being listened to, not like this. Most people heard the word mechanic and assumed everything about him. Grease, noise, simplicity, but Emily asked questions that made him think, made him remember things he hadn't said out loud in years. "So," she said, tilting her head with a teasing smile, "what's the hardest thing about fixing cars?" Ethan grinned. "Convincing people their car is the problem, not the mechanic," she laughed. And he thought it was the kind of sound a man could build a home around. When she reached for her coffee cup, her hand trembled slightly. Without thinking, he steadied it for her, his fingers brushing hers. She tensed for a second but didn't pull away. "Thanks," she murmured, and for a moment, something fragile but powerful passed between them. Her eyes lowered, and she added quietly, "You're the first person in a long time who didn't flinch when they saw me." Ethan frowned, confused. "Flinch?" She looked out the window, her reflection caught in the glass like a ghost of her old self. "People treat me like I'm made of glass now. They smile, but it's the kind of smile that says, 'Poor thing.' I hate it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Maybe they just don't know how to act." "And you do?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He smiled. "I fix things, remember? If something's broken, I don't look away. I look closer." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide her scars. "You talk like someone who's been broken too," she said. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe I have. But it's different when you're the one holding the wrench." She smiled faintly, and he could see her fighting not to like him too much. There was a wall there. Invisible but strong, a wall she'd built to keep out pity, rejection, disappointment, and yet he could feel cracks forming already. They talked about little things after that. Favorite foods, childhood dreams. She used to love running through the rain. He used to sleep in cars he couldn't afford to fix. Life's strange, she said at one point, tracing a circle on her cup. You spend years planning everything, then one moment changes it all. He nodded, like sitting at the wrong table. She chuckled softly. Exactly like that. A quiet settled between them. Not awkward, but heavy with something unnamed. Ethan wanted to ask her for her number, maybe to see her again, but before he could, a shadow fell over the table. A man in a sharp black suit stood there, his expression cold and commanding. Emily, he said firmly, his voice deep and edged with authority. Who is this? Emily's smile faltered. Dad, she said softly. Ethan's stomach dropped. He recognized that face instantly. Mr. Harrison, the CEO whose luxury cars. Ethan stepped out of the cafe, the cool air biting against his skin, but it did nothing to clear the heaviness in his chest. He had no right to feel hurt. It wasn't even his date. It wasn't his world, but still. Something about Emily's eyes when her father pulled her away haunted him. He could still hear her soft laughter, her quiet confidence when she said maybe sitting at the wrong table wasn't a mistake. He walked aimlessly down the street, his boots scuffing against the sidewalk, his mind looping through the scene again and again. He'd seen plenty of people like Mr. Harrison before, rich, proud, the kind who looked at him like grease and dust instead of a man. He thought he'd stopped caring years ago, but this time it stung. Maybe because, for the first time, he'd met someone who looked past his dirt and saw something more. He wanted to see her again, to apologize, to say he hadn't meant to. Intrude, but what could a mechanic possibly offer the daughter of a CEO? Still, fate didn't seem done with him yet. The next morning, the sound of the garage door rattling open echoed through the shop. Ethan was already under the hood of a broken-down sedan when his coworker yelled, Hey boss, we've got a fancy one pulling in. Looks like one of those electric chairs on wheels. Ethan frowned, wiping his hands and stepping out. The sunlight glinted off the hood of a luxury car, sleek and black, the kind only CEOs could afford. His stomach twisted when the driver stepped out. It was Mr. Harrison, and in the back seat sat Emily, her expression unreadable. You're Ethan, right? Harrison's voice was curt. You fixed one of my company's cars last year. Ethan nodded slowly, still not sure what was happening. Yes, sir. Harrison gestured toward the back. Emily's wheelchair needs repair. She refuses to let anyone else touch it. Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his. I told him you fix things better than anyone. Her tone was light, but her gaze was serious, full of unspoken gratitude. Days passed, but Emily lingered in Ethan's mind like a melody that refused to fade. He told himself to forget her, to move on, but every time he looked at a car, engine broken yet full of potential, he thought of her. He tried drowning himself in work, fixing cars until his hands bled, but the memory of her laughter kept sneaking through the noise of wrenches and engines. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the garage lights buzzed to life, Ethan heard the faint hum of an engine outside. He looked up to see the same sleek black car pulling in again. His heart skipped. Emily was in the passenger seat this time, alone except for the driver, who waited silently. She smiled when she saw him, that same soft, knowing smile that had disarmed him the first time. Hey mechanic, she said teasingly. You look like you've been working too hard. He wiped his hands on a rag, trying to play it cool. Some of us don't have chauffeurs, he said. She rolled her eyes playfully. Some of us don't have grease under our nails. She asked if she could stay a while, saying she wanted to watch him work. He agreed without thinking, pulling up a stool beside his workstation. For a while, they didn't talk, just shared the quiet rhythm of the garage, tools clinking, distant city sounds, the faint hum of her wheelchair motor. Then she spoke softly. You know, I used to come to places like this with my brother. He loved machines. He died in the same crash that... She trailed off. Ethan froze, glancing up. Emily, he began, but she shook her head. It's okay. I don't talk about it much. I thought I'd never come near anything mechanical again. But being here doesn't hurt like I thought it would. Her voice trembled, honest and raw. Ethan put down his wrench and sat beside her. You don't have to fix what happened, he said quietly. You just have to keep moving, even if it's in a different way. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. You make it sound simple. It's not, he admitted. But it's possible. She looked at him then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. She reached into her bag and handed him a folded napkin. On it was a small, messy sketch, a car engine with wildflowers blooming through it. For you, she said. You told me machines were your art. I figured maybe art and machines aren't so different after all. He took it carefully, as though it were made of glass. I don't think anyone's ever given me something like this before. Then, I'm glad I was first, she said softly. A week later, rain drummed softly against the tin roof of the garage. Ethan stood over an old pickup truck, lost in the rhythm of the rain and the steady hum of the world outside. He hadn't seen Emily since that evening. Every sound of a car pulling in made his chest tighten with hope. But each time it wasn't her. He told himself she belonged to a life far from his, polished, controlled, perfect. Yet some stubborn part of him kept waiting. When the black luxury car finally appeared again, headlights cutting through the mist, he almost dropped his wrench. This time it wasn't the driver. Who stepped out first? It was Emily. She was moving her wheelchair by herself, steady and determined despite the uneven ground. He rushed forward, worried she might slip, but she lifted a hand, stopping him. I can handle it, she said with a grin. You forget I've been through worse than puddles. He smiled, nodding, but his heart was thudding in his chest. She rolled closer, the smell of rain and warm asphalt surrounding them. I had to see you, she said quietly. My father found out I came here last week. He wasn't happy. Ethan's expression darkened. I don't want to cause trouble for you. You didn't, she replied quickly. For once I told him he doesn't get to decide who I talk to. And you know what? He didn't know what to say. Her laughter was soft but full of triumph. Ethan looked at her with admiration, seeing not the fragile girl from the cafe but a woman blazing with strength. You stood up to him, he said. About time someone did. Maybe you gave me the courage, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. A flash of thunder echoed, and for a moment they just watched the rain streak down the windows, silence wrapping around them. Then Emily reached into her lap and unfolded something. A sketchbook, worn and paint-stained. I finished something, she said shyly, handing it to him. Inside was a drawing of a man kneeling beside a car, light glinting off his tools, and beside him a woman in a wheelchair, her hands covered in paint, both surrounded by gears turning into flowers. At the bottom she'd written, We fix what we can. We heal what we touch. Ethan's throat tightened. Emily. This is beautiful. She smiled, her eyes glistening. It's us, isn't it? Two broken things trying to make each other whole. Before he could answer, the door opened and Mr. Harrison stepped inside. His face was unreadable as his eyes moved from Emily to Ethan. For a tense moment, the air was thick with everything unspoken. Then Harrison sighed, his shoulders softening. My daughter tells me you've done more for her than all the specialists' money could buy, he said quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say. I just listened, he finally murmured. Harrison nodded slowly. Sometimes that's all a person needs. He looked at his daughter, pride softening his tone. You've changed, Emily. She smiled gently. Maybe I just remembered who I was.